Alex sighed and tapped his access band against the panel of the door. Another day, another shift on the station's emergency medical ward. Humanity was spreading across the stars, and the uptake of humanity, its culture and its peoples, was shockingly rapid. However, there were, as always, issues. As the on-staff human, he found his job was more often than not the assessment for the cause of the injury and deciding if the rather sizable human insurance fund set up by the Galactic Council would apply. Simply put, if a human was involved, it was Alex's job to work out what caused the issue. The Human Insurance Fund, or HIC as it got shortened to, was created by the Galactic Council to cover the ever-growing number of injuries and damages caused by humans doing human things. It was officially introduced after one human was involved in a bet stating he couldn't drive a shuttle at near light speed around a city and through its buildings. He succeeded, but the buildings suffered damage from the shockwaves, not to mention the injuries from the pressure wave. Stepping from the relative quiet of the staff access corridors into the bustle of the main section of the ward, Alex was accosted almost instantly by one of the other nurses, who handed him a datapad and pointed him towards a bed at the far end with an exasperated sigh and glare that said everything Alex needed to know. Another human in a mess of his own making. Reaching the bed, Alex found a human cradling an arm that was badly bandaged and had blood seeping through the bandages already, and a lichen with a clearly broken snout and several missing teeth. The two of them seemed to be rather companionable, and seemed to be debating where to go for dinner. Resisting the urge to roll his eyes, Alex could feel the inevitable answers to his questions, but he had to ask them anyway. "Afternoon, I'm Alex. I'll be conducting your intake interview. Then administering what treatments are needed," he said, as he glanced at the pad. "So you would be Sergeant Johnson." He gestured towards the human, who nodded in response. "And you would be Miss Cruelfang." The 7-foot wolf woman nodded in response. "Fantastic, and just for our records, could you explain how you both were injured?" The lichen's ears went flat, and she looked at the floor, while the sergeant looked at the roof like it held the answers to the universe. Alex resisted the desire to rub his temples. "Okay, I'm going to make a rough guess here. Just tell me if I'm correct." He glanced at the tablet he held, it having the list of their injuries. "You saw her at a bar, confused her for a canid, and decided to flirt. The only thing you remembered about canid flirting was poking them on the nose as both an invitation to bed and a compliment." The sergeant let out a mumbled noise that could be assumed to be a confirmation. "Then you, being offended at someone daring to 1. Mistake you for a canid, and 2. Making such an inappropriate gesture, tried to savage his arm?" The wolf woman nodded sheepishly. At this point, Alex did sigh and shook his head. "And the good sergeant's response was to punch you square in the snout?" Another nod, this time from both of them. Alex looked down at his tablet and filled in a few boxes before circling human responsible in the reason and approving the HIC fund release. "One last question. Am I to assume that she was impressed with your fighting spirit and now you're actually arranging a date?" The fact the lichen's tail started thumping on the bed they were both sat on told Alex all he needed to know. "Well, congratulations. However, since your wounds are not pressing, I suggest you sit tight. I'll be..." Alex was cut off as the doors to the ER banged open and a trolley was wheeled in. "Right back," he finished, before bolting towards the trolley, his attention pulled by the human woman who was following the trolley and halfway between hysteria and embarrassment. Alex reached the trolley with enough time to see that on it was a rather large Croxian, whose pupils were blown wide. Pulling the woman to the side, he got her seated and gave her a warm smile. "Please relax, ma'am," he said gently, and did his best to get her to calm down. "I didn't know. He just stopped. We should have stopped when he mentioned tingling. I thought," was all Alex got. He noticed the woman was dressed in a bedrobe and slip-on shoes. He tapped the pad and started a new entry. "It's okay, just tell me what happened and we'll make sure he's okay," Alex said, eventually getting the woman to give him the full story. "Let me just repeat that to make sure I have it clear," Alex said as he looked at his pad. "You and your husband were using flavored lube." Alex paused as the woman nodded, blushing again. "And you didn't check if the lube was species safe for your husband." It turned out the flavouring was a pretty strong narcotic, and he overdosed while taste testing, Alex said, going over his condensed notes from the woman's halting and stammered story, as she tried to give the critical information without embarrassing herself. She nodded again. Alex smiled. That's good news. He'll go into detox, get put on a drip for dehydration, and be out in a few days, right as rain, he said, as he tapped on the pad. Now, if you'll go to the desk over there, tell them your husband's name, they'll get you pointed to his ward, Alex said, pointing to the information desk that was in the corner of the massive ER room. Waiting to make sure she was headed in the right direction, Alex stood and started to walk back towards the lichen and the human that had attempted to flirt with her. Noticing they were being treated already, he turned towards the side of the ER room to grab himself a drink before more issues arose. As Alex approached the small break station, which consisted of a drinks dispenser, a single plastic chair that was never free, and a collection of mugs that no one seemed to know who they belonged to, he was slammed into and dragged sideways. Looking down, he was shocked to see the violently blue hair of his co-worker and maybe crush for Laura. She was a Lasari. They were best described as bipedal snakes, albeit with pretty clear mammalian traits. They were also way stronger than most other species. That included humans. Dragged into one of the supply closets and the door closed behind him, all he could see was the glow of her eyes glaring up at him. "You missed the check-in! Again!" she hissed at him, her annoyance stretching the sibilance in her voice. "I didn't miss it, it moved," he responded, doing his best to glare back, though trying to glare at a pair of glowing eyes was hard. "It moved because you missed it, and keep your voice down," she snapped back, the glow dimming as she narrowed her eyes. "I am being quiet, you're the one hissing," Alex said, though the moment he said, he knew it wasn't the right thing to say. "That's how I whisper, focus!" Her voice was slightly sharper now. He'd upset her with that comment. "Focus on what?" he said, trying to keep his voice down. "You, missing check-in," she repeated, and shuffled a little in the cramped space. "It moved and I was down on triage because Alice Syndra didn't turn up," he pointed out, which caused a visible roll of her eyes. "Because it's never your fault," she said, her voice dripping in sarcasm. "Oh, bite me," Alex said back, more than a little fed up. "Maybe I will," Valora said, and he could hear the smile in her face. Alex flinched at the implication, which caused him to realize just how close they were in the tiny closet. "You're very close," he pointed out, trying to reroute the conversation away from her threatening to bite him. "It's a closet, moron," she said, her voice having its bite back. "Yeah, well, maybe we should get back on the floor before someone notices," Alex pointed out. "Fine," Valora snapped, before pushing her way out the closet, though she did pull him out after her, holding on to him for a little longer than needed. Or maybe he was just imagining things again. This shift was off to a fine start.